Joining me now is author and journalist Batya Ungar-Sargon. Batya, I want to start with Trump's speech to the Saudi-US Investment Forum this week. Here it is.
As President of the United States, my preference will always be for peace and partnership whenever those outcomes can be achieved. Always. It's always going to be that way. Only a fool would think otherwise.
And in a post on X, you said it was probably the most momentous foreign policy address of your lifetime. Why is that?
Thank you so much for having me. Yes, as I wrote about in my Free Press column, what the president did throughout his hour-long speech was effectively repudiate both the sort of neocon warmongering of Republican administrations past, but also the kind of appeasement and attempts to find common ground and insist that everybody has the same values of Democratic administrations of the past. So he took on both, the Bush model and the Obama-Biden model and said, we're not going to do either of those things. We're going to respect the sovereignty of our allies, and we're going to respect the sovereignty of our own people, and we're going to prioritize the dignity of working class Americans by looking for partners who bring something to the table, who are able to fight their own fights and come together and put aside warring factionalism in order to pursue peace through strength and through partnership, through commerce, through the great economic boon that the president was able to generate through the Abraham Accords. So this is really a new moment in American foreign policy. They're putting aside the nation building and the failed forever wars that we've been having in this country for the last decades. Donald Trump is fundamentally anti-war. He hates war. He thinks it's unbelievably wasteful. And what he's offering both to the American people and to the globe is partnership through strength, through deals, through success, and through bringing massive amounts of investment back home to the U.S. It's really a golden age in America, and he is inviting our allies to join us if they're willing to put down their guns and their swords and pursue peace over war.
And you mentioned the Abraham Accords. Look, he's urged Syrian and Saudi leaders to sign the Abraham Accords recognising Israel. How big a deal is that?
It's a really big deal. And the way that he phrased it in his speech was really beautiful. He said he personally would be very honored if the Saudis would join the Abraham Accords and sign normalization with Israel on their own time. He was very clear to say that's not going to happen right now. Obviously, the situation in Gaza is too volatile. But this was really a shot across the bow, both for the Saudis and I think for the Israelis, to be a little bit more open to a different approach to fighting their wars, which of course are just wars, but to think more broadly and more openly about what President Trump can achieve for them, given the success that he brought to the Middle East through the Abraham Accords.
And in just the last 24 hours, there have been reports of an IDF strike in Khan Yunis aimed at, well, who is now, I suppose, the de facto leader, Mohammed Sinwar. What's the latest on that?
Yes, we can only hope that these reports are accurate. Hamas's leadership is in absolute tatters. There is a vacuum there. There is nobody leading the terrorist organization. The way that they released the American captive, Idan Alexander, was through an intermediary. And so it's really an opportune moment for somebody like the Saudis or the Qataris to say, you know what, in recognition of what President Trump is offering us, we're going to step into that leadership hole and really pursue peace on behalf of the forgotten Palestinian people who have been living, of course, as Hamas's hostages for over 15 years.
Now, back home in the US, and since the presidential election, it's really been quite astonishing, some of the admissions about Biden's cognitive decline. But the revisionism and the reframing of the narrative, look, it's almost been impressive. And Jake Tapper is obviously the most notable, just released a book. What's been most notable about it for you?
I'm really disgusted with this because they aren't doing this because they actually care about telling the truth. they're doing this because they are trying to launder their reputations so that they can once again seize power. They know that the American people were exposed to their lying and to their gaslighting. All of these people who had access to the president and knew what the situation was kept that to themselves for as long as they thought that he was still able to give them the power that they so desperately want. And the minute the American people became wise to this on their own because of the debate, they stabbed Biden in the back, and the roost was up. But to me, this whole fake mea culpa is just as appalling as the initial gaslighting because it's not real. It's not about anything except their limitless desire for more and more power. And the worst part about it is that the Democrats don't even know what they want to do with that power. They have no agenda. If you ask them, okay, you want to win, why? What would you do if you won? They literally have no answer. And when you see what they're prioritizing right now, whether it's trans people in women's sports or illegal immigrants or gangbangers, it really boggles the mind. They're very, very lost. And the reason for that is because Donald Trump stole everything that was popular from their agenda. They abandoned the working class, they abandoned labor to cater to far left radical economic elites. And that's who their base is now, the top 10%. Unfortunately, can't win an election with 10% of the electorate.
No, you absolutely can't, and it's been so self-serving. Obviously, as you said, laundering their reputations, but there's been plenty of people saying plenty about this for a very long time, and it's occasionally nice to be right about these things. Now, onto the economy, and obviously you've had a period of high inflation in the US. We've had it here in Australia. It's been global, but recent data is showing that inflation in the US is now coming in below expectation, and even the left-leaning CNN had to admit it.
There is new data that just landed from the Labor Department showing inflation year over year actually slowed to the lowest annual inflation rate since February of 2021.
Batya, what's the cause of this, and what does this tell us about the current US economy?
It's so amazing because every economist predicted we were going to go into a recession, and every economist predicted that the tariffs were going to be inflationary. And of course, this was all nonsense. They've been just as wrong about this as they were about NAFTA and as they were about mass immigration, which they always tell us raises the GDP. They're wrong about everything when it comes to the daily lives of average Americans. And Trump has been right again and again and again and again. And it is so amazing to see that the economy is just so nimble as to absorb the very important shock of the tariffs. A 10% tariff is now the new normal for the United States. Donald Trump is raising billions of dollars in revenue to pay off our debt, which is extraordinary news and long overdue. And inflation has gone down. So everything they predicted would happen out of hatred of Donald Trump simply did not appear. And yet they cannot give him an ounce of credit for this. All they do is move on to the next thing that they try to turn into a scandal. The untold story here is the way that American business is actually absorbing some of the costs of inflation out of a newfound patriotism that I believe is very much generated out of their respect for Donald Trump and for the economy that he's trying to build. So you see people like GM promising that any cost due to the tariffs, they will take out of their corporate profits rather than passing on to the consumer. There are other companies that are doing that, and boy, are those companies going to be rewarded by the American consumer.
Yeah, absolutely. And those pesky egg prices, look at them come down despite what everyone had to say about them. Now, moving on to immigration, and that there does continue to be a hot button issue in the US, including in relation to foreign gang members. So much so that Trump's announced a first ever self-deportation program.
I signed an executive order to launch the first ever self-deportation program for illegal aliens. We are making it as easy as possible for illegal aliens to leave America. Any illegal alien can simply show up at an airport and receive a free flight out of our country.
Batya, that sounds almost quite sensible. What's the feeling over there? And it's been interesting, some of the rub, some of the friction in relation to Americans defending illegal immigrants and criminals from deportation.
This is not my favorite thing only because I feel like it's a little bit rewarding bad behavior.
Mm.
If it works, I will totally support it. But honestly, I'm not sure people are going to self-deport. I think they are going to have to do a little bit more work going and getting these people. We know where a lot of them are living because they're living in hotels that are being paid for by taxpayers. I think if they cut them from a lot of the benefits roles, a lot of people would then consider self-deporting at that point. But that's going to take Congress, and Congress right now is mired in this reconciliation bill. So we'll see what happens with that.
Now, as a corollary to all that, there is objection within the US to the US offering asylum to white South Africans. Why and where does that come from?
I have to say this was not my favorite thing. Of all the people who are desperately in need of asylum, they wouldn't have been at the top of my, to me, this seems a little bit like reverse identity politics in a way. There's somebody in the administration, perhaps Elon Musk, for whom this was an important issue. He, of course, is from South Africa. But yeah, it did seem to me in a way to be a bit of a troll of the left. And
Mm.
I don't know why we're bringing in more people when the whole point is, we're trying to deport people who are here illegally. But this is something that I think obviously was important to somebody, and they got what they were looking for.
And immigration, I suppose, it's still causing some problems for the Democrats, and including the California Governor Gavin Newsom, flip-flopping on a policy in relation to illegal immigrants receiving taxpayer-funded health. You'd think the answer here would be pretty common sense, but like you said, taxpayers are paying for them to stay in hotels. But this is still a complicated issue for the Democrats, isn't it, even though they're not in government?
The fact that Gavin Newsom is out there saying he's ready to take the fall and be the first to flip-flop, he's going to be the first of many. The Democrats have no future if they can't get behind where the American people are at on immigration. And so seeing somebody like Gavin Newsom, who's sort of on the fence about whether he's going to run in 2028 or not, somebody who's positioned very well to make these big pronouncements because, he may not run, he may not. This is a sign that the wind is changing and that people are getting the message in the Democratic Party that they have to really do a bit of a 180 on immigration if they ever want to be competitive again.
I think that's an excellent observation. And lastly, while President Donald Trump is out trying to strike trade deals and bring peace to the Middle East, a lone House Democrat from Michigan's trying to impeach the president. Now, Sri Thanadar recently moved to force a chamber-wide vote on his impeachment resolution against President Donald Trump. He ended up backing down, Batya, but what's the point of this, honestly?
This man is a joke and an embarrassment to his party. And I think even a lot of Democrats realized that. And so they shut it down very quickly. I think they realized that they need to get their act together. And I was glad to see them not have any tolerance for this.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you. Thank you so much for your observations. Batya Ungar-Sargon, thank you for joining the show.
Thank you for having me. Thank you so much.